As a self-taught cheesemaker, I've spent nearly 1,000 hours slinging milk into cheese over the past year. And I've made loads of improvements, had unexpected breakthroughs, and experienced lots of frustration. Dang it. That is not what I wanted. So in this video, I'm going to share 18 lessons and shortcuts I've learned over the last year to help you skip confusion and understand cheese making better so you can get delicious results more quickly and consistently. Oh my word. I'm going to run through these points without getting too bogged down in the details and the science. So if you want to do more digging, go for it. And then share what you learned in the comments. The whole point of this video is to get your creative juices flowing and give your cheese making a leg up. And we can all use some help when it comes to cheese making. Now, for those of you who are brand new, if you want to become skilled at making a handful of cheeses in record time, my workshop teaches how to make 5 kinds of cheese using traditional methods and without any fancy equipment. So check that out. These first couple lessons have to do with milk, and what better way to start off than with a confession. I do not like the taste of raw cream in my coffee, especially during the summertime. Because of all the fresh grass the cows are eating, summer milk has more of a grassy flavor, or just more of a flavor in general. And because fat carries flavor, that means when you add cream to coffee, the cream's grassy notes become more pronounced. It's not bad really, it's just noticeable. And when I'm drinking my coffee, I don't want anything to compete with the coffee flavor. So for years, my solution was to buy store cream, which was ridiculous considering that we have cows in the backyard and the price of cream is sky high right now. So when I discovered that I could remove about 95% of that grassy flavor, I was pretty excited. So here's how you do it. Heat your cream to about 145 degrees, stirring frequently, and then once it reaches that temperature, you hold it there for 5 minutes. Once that time is up, flash chill the cream by setting it in a container of ice water. And that's it. That simple process isn't perfect, but it does kill off the majority of that flavor. And I can now use cream in my coffee. Here's another confession. I do not like the flavor or texture of clabber as a base for my drinks or smoothies. To me, it tastes weak and a little watery. But then one day I added a pint jar of clabber to our yogurt fruit smoothies, and I was actually pleasantly surprised. My son said it made the smoothies more creamy. And I think he's right. It seems to be that the clabber cuts the tang and the thickness of the yogurt, making the smoothie a little sweeter and a little lighter and giving it the effect of being more creamy. So next time you have extra clabber, try mixing 1 part clabber to 4 or 5 parts yogurt in your smoothie and let me know what you think. Now, this last year, I started putting my natural cultures, usually clabber or yogurt, into the cheese pot before I added the milk. And then when we added the milk, it would mix together naturally and easily, no stirring necessary. Or so I thought. But then I started noticing there was this film of grainy milk on the bottom of the cheese pot when I went to stir the curds with my hand later. At first I thought maybe the milk was scorching, but then when I dumped the curds out, the pot bottom was clean, so I knew that wasn't it. And then it dawned on me that the film was perhaps a result of not stirring in the culture. So since then I have started stirring again, and the crusty bottom mystery has disappeared. So even though those cheeses, as far as I can tell, are perfectly fine, a bottom film is probably not a good thing when you're making cheese. So stirring your cultures. Now for years I've operated under the assumption that it takes 1/4 cup or 60 mils of a natural culture to culture 1 gallon of milk. And that is true. But I have been noticing that some of my cheeses seem to be stronger flavored and slightly more acidic than I'd like. And I began to wonder if I was perhaps over-acidifying them by adding a little too much culture. So this past year, I've been experimenting with dialing back the culture by about 25%. I can't say for sure if the reduction is solving the problem, but so far all the cheeses have been behaving well and the ones we have cut into have been good. Keep in mind that raw milk already requires less culture than pasteurized milk. So this test is specific to raw milk cheesemakers. I am a huge fan of natural cultures. You all know that. You also know that I'm not opposed to manufactured freeze-dried cultures, and I have a bag of them in my freezer. Well, recently I started adding LM57 to some of my cheeses just for the heck of it. This is a miso adjunct that is used in conjunction with a regular culture to boost the buttery sweet flavor of the cheeses. I've used LM57 before, but I couldn't quite determine whether or not there was actual flavor change, but this time around, the cheeses taste more buttery. So if you want to try enhancing the flavor of your cheeses, try LM57. It is a fun one to play with. You know how most recipes and videos, mine included, say that you're supposed to let the curds rest or heal for 5 minutes after cutting them? Well, that's not always necessary. I've actually been skipping that step a lot of the time, and the cheeses have been turning out just fine, for what it's worth. In my cottage cheese video, I make a big deal about cracking the lid on the pot for that 24 hours when the milk is culturing. You gotta make sure there's airflow, I say. I don't do that anymore. I smack the lid directly on the pot and it's all good. I still crack the lid on my jars of clabber though, because they do need the airflow, I think. Here's something I learned this year, or at least began to understand better, and it has to do with cutting the curds. When you cut the curds impacts the moisture level of the final cheese. If you cut the curd when it is soft and freshly set, you get a harder cheese. And if you allow the curd to rest longer and then cut the curds, you get a more moist cheese. It sounds counterintuitive, but think about it. If you cut the curd when it has just set, when it is softer, more of that whey is going to escape, resulting in a drier cheese. But if you wait, let the curd set longer, and then cut it up, the curds are then firmer and they have locked in more moisture. A lot of people refer to this as moisture locking time, and that makes a lot of sense. Lots of people get freaked out about this next tip, but if you want to enormously improve your cheeses and simplify your process, then you're gonna have to use your hands as much as possible. I have talked about this before. From almost the very beginning, I have been stirring the curds with my hand, but this year I've taken it one step further. I have started using my hands in place of a whisk to cut the curds. Anytime a recipe says to cut the curds into 1/4-inch pieces or to use a balloon whisk to cut the curds, I just use my hand instead. It's efficient and it works like a charm. Now this next thing helps to get a cheese with a very uniform and smooth paste without almost any mechanical holes. I tried it a couple times way back when and I failed miserably, but I persisted and now I am doing it and it works really well. So if you want to get a cheese with a lot of mechanical holes like a Havarti, you're supposed to stir up the curds a lot right before putting them into the mold, and that's going to give them the mechanical holes that you like to see, a lacy texture. On the other hand, if you want to avoid mechanical holes, then you don't want to break up the curds when you're transferring them to the mold. But how do you do this? Well, you use your cheesecloth. Tuck the 2 edges of the cheesecloth around your hands and then slide your hands along the bottom of the pot beneath the curds, dragging the cloth along behind you, and then pulling it up on the other side to create a hammock of curds. Now, the first few times you're going to try this, it's going to feel pretty clumsy and awkward, especially if you are working with a large amount of curds, as I do. And you may not get all the curds into the hammock. I rarely do. But to make it go a little easier, put your cheese pot on the floor. That will give you more leverage, and also keep a bowl next to you so that you don't drip whey everywhere as you're transferring the hammock of cheese curds to the mold. And above all else, as with everything I say, keep practicing and eventually you'll get it. Now, when knotting a cheesecloth full of curds for free-form pressing, do you ever find yourself struggling with this big bulky knot that is going to leave a big indentation in the cheese? Well, yeah, me too. But then I learned about a special knot from one of Gavin's videos. To make this knot, simply hold 3 corners of the cheesecloth in one hand and then tie them up with the 4th corner. This is called a Stilton knot. And then what you do is you flip the curds on its side and you press them flat that way, and the knot is off to the side, and so you do not have that indentation. So next time you want to press a cheese in a bag, say you're making a jack or a paneer, try this knot and then thank me. I mean Gavin. And if you want to see this in action, watch the paneer video I did. I demonstrate this knot 4 times in that video. Now, in my Havarti video, I said that some recipes call for soaking the wheel of cheese in cool water after it has pressed, and this is supposed to make it a sweeter cheese. But I did not do it. It was one extra step, and that was totally fine. However, since posting that video, I have made Havarti again, and I did the soaking step. I made 3 cheeses in this mold. So I had 3 of these molds. Once they were done pressing, I removed their cloths and then put the naked cheeses back in the mold. I think I stacked 2 in one and had another cheese in the second mold. And then I just put these in a big pot, covered them with cool tap water, and let them sit overnight. And it worked. or at least nothing bad happened. The cheeses tasted really sweet, really beautiful. So was it the cold water soak? Maybe. You want to know one of the problems with marinated feta? At cave and fridge temps, the oil solidifies. So when you want to last minute grab a piece of feta to crumble over your salad, you have to get the jar out and let it set at room temperature and wait for the oil to liquefy. Or you just grab a fork and hack it out of the jar, oil gloop and all. It's a pain. Well, in Samin Nosrat's most recent book, which is excellent and not cheese related, she solves this problem by mixing oils, 2-part neutral oil to 1-part olive oil. Neutral oil does not congeal at fridge temps, and so the brine stays liquid even when it's in the fridge. Ding, 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 ding. I've always struggled with my bamboo mats getting moldy, icky, gross when I'm air drying my cheeses, until I finally figured out a solution. Don't use them. Now I just set my cheeses directly on a plate to air dry. Sure, some of the brine in the way will puddle around the cheese. I just wipe it off when I flip the cheeses and it's totally fine. This summer, I started waxing some of my cheeses and it has been a game changer. The cheeses turn out creamy and smooth and delicious. There is virtually no tending while aging, and there is no rind waste. It is true that waxing requires a little bit more work up front, so here are 3 little tips to help reduce that headache. First, bulk buy your wax so you don't have to worry about running out. 2, create permanent wax bowls. Melt the wax into an old bowl. Make sure it's big enough to dunk whatever size cheese you typically make. And then just store the melted wax in that bowl, and as the level drops, just add new wax to it. And the 3rd tip is so that you don't waste time waiting for the wax to set between dunks. Chill your cheese prior to waxing. Just pop it into the fridge for an hour or 2 while the wax is melting. And then once the wax is all hot and melty and liquid, the cheese will be nice and cold and chilly, and you can just more quickly wax it. I used to spend so much time stressing about how to clean up a natural rind cheese. I'd scrape them, I'd trim them, I'd even cut off the whole thing sometimes. And every time it just felt like so much hassle. But then a year ago, I began experimenting with something that felt kind of risky: washing the cheeses. The first time I stuck a cheese directly under the tap, I was worried that it would disintegrate or be compromised in some way. Like, you're not supposed to put cheese under running water. But here's the cool thing. A natural rind is actually pretty tough. It can handle a rinse, even a vigorous scrubbing, even for a prolonged period of time. I have even used hot water and soap when I'm trying to get off the residual lard from a cloth-bound cheese. Under the water, all the weird stains and molds just wash away, and you're left with a cheese that looks brand new. You can let it air dry for a couple hours or simply just pat it dry with a paper towel and cut into it. It's ready to go. It's amazing. Now, everyone says that specific colors of mold are bad on aging cheeses. I'm not going to deny that because I don't know everything, but I do know that my cheeses grow all kinds of molds. Hairy mold, bright yellow, green, blue, brown, red. Right now, the majority of my cheeses in the cave look like they have been inflicted with a red skin rash. And when I wrote about that in my newsletter, many people wrote back saying that that was probably a sign of a bad mold. And it may be. I do not know. However, what I do know is that I have scrubbed off those molds, and the cheeses are perfectly fine. They taste delicious. We even eat the rind. See, cheese making is very location specific. So it stands to reason that cheeses that are made and aged in different places will develop different molds, just as people have different accents depending on where they live in the country. So instead of fretting over how a cheese looks, I tend to rely more on how it feels. If it is stodgy or soggy, that's a more reliable indicator that the integrity of the cheese has been compromised by something that is unwanted. Similarly, it is much more useful to evaluate a person by their behaviors and actions rather than by their accent or how they look. I guess what I'm saying here is that my tolerance for weird and unusual is expanding. Assumed bad molds aren't always bad. In fact, many are manageable, even harmless, once you understand them. And even if you don't understand them, they're still often perfectly fine. Again, this applies to most people too. Now, this last thing is something that I have alluded to many times, but I don't think I've actually outright said it. And it's about the conundrum that I find myself in as a teacher while still being a student. I am a self-taught cheesemaker, and as such, I am still learning and growing. Some of the stuff I said back at the start, not only would I change it, some of it was just plain wrong. So who am I to teach cheesemaking? I've never been trained, I'm not certified, I'm not a professional. There's so much I don't know or understand. And yet people were making cheese for centuries and they never went to cheese school. The only difference between them and me is that their successes and failures were not broadcasted on the World Wide Web. Which brings me to the next point. There is a ton of information out there. AI is running rampant. Everyone, me included, could have a platform. This, at best, can be confusing, and at worst, it can be dangerous. But I also know that learning from other practitioners is a really good way to learn. And finding real, hardworking, mistake-making mentors is becoming increasingly precious, especially on the internet. And if you're new at something, the skill is much more approachable if learned from someone who is just a few steps ahead of you rather than from a full-blown expert. So while it's true that I don't have all the answers and I flat out get things wrong some of the time, I think that's part of the value. I guess what I'm saying is be smart. Think. Use my learning as a launching pad for your own. And then when we deviate and you learn better, share it with me because I am also a student. Now, cheese making can feel very foreign when you're first starting out. It's a lot like learning a new language. So if you're struggling to make sense of humidity levels and proper cheese making equipment and weird cheese making terminology, then watch this video next and I'll see you there. Happy milk slinging.